calling our workshop to order at 5 p.m. Good to see everyone this evening. Thank you for coming out. Look forward to having this discussion and receiving your input. This time, we're going to ask staff, Miss Amanda, if she would come at this time and give us a recap from what we discussed in our previous meeting and provide us with any updates on any of the progression regarding this development or the development order request.
Would you like me to put the presentation up that we had?
Yes, please.
I believe that we have that. Have to wait for it to come up. Here we are. So what we have is an application for a development order for Bedford Park Townhomes. The applicant is Rutherford 26 LLC, and the owner is the same. The agent is Scott Rutherford of SCR and Associates NWFL. The project engineer is Scott Rutherford, and the reviewing engineer was Chris Short. That is of the site plans. The reviewing traffic engineer for their traffic impact analysis that was submitted is Vincent Spa, and he's on his way. He sent me a message saying he got caught up in traffic coming from the beach, but he will be here to answer any questions. The parcel is 11823-080-000, and it's located on the east side of 26th Street. It's east of Minnesota. The property size is 31.16 acres, and it has 3 land use categories located upon it. The first one is the mixed use, which is approximately 6.48 acres. The second one is 11.8 acres of high-density residential, and there is also 12.88 acres of conservation. The land is currently vacant, and the developer would like to construct 154 townhomes on the site, as well as the stormwater infrastructure and landscaping to support that development. So the city's contracted engineer consultant recommends, following looking at their reviewing their traffic impact analyses, which they sent a few different versions. This was an ongoing process, that an eastbound turn lane at the intersection of East 26th Street and County Road Northeast Avenue is needed to address a capacity deficiency, meaning that the road would start to have problems with the volume of traffic that would occur at that intersection with the additional of the project traffic. They recommended that the turn lane should be at least 200 feet in length, 150 feet for storage, and a 50-foot taper. Now, we also have a figure of when that intersection would be failing. The data, it's like a science, so they have the programs, and it'll say at which point it's going to fail. So I think it was something like, and I have the information, 136 units are what trigger it. So they're asking for 154, but they could build a number of units before that would be required. And that's one of the things that they suggested that they do, if allowed to, would be to phase it. So that they'd build a few of them, and then they wouldn't put the turn lane, in until the next phase. That's entirely up to you. The Planning Commission recommendation was approval conditional upon the construction of that eastbound right turn lane at the intersection of East 26th Street and County Road 389 East Avenue by a 4-1 vote. A bit of additional information is I referred to the 3 land uses that are located upon there. So that 6.48 acres of mixed use would allow for townhomes or apartments to be developed at a density of up to 10 dwelling units per acre, thereby allowing for up to 64 dwelling units per acre That is their entitlement per the land use there. And the high-density residential, of which there are 11.8 acres, also allows for townhomes or apartments at a density of 20 units per acre, thereby allowing for a potential 236 dwelling units in the high-density land use area. Now, that word potential, had caused some headaches for some of the citizens, and they had contacted me because they were concerned that meant that the developer was looking at possibly doing that. That is not the case. That is my word. I just wanted to let you know that, these developers don't want to do it. They want to do 154 townhomes, but under that land use, that is what would be allowed under the land use. So taking that high density, what's allowable under the high density and allowable under the mixed use, they could actually, if they wanted to, or another developer, if they changed their mind about doing this project, they could ask for up to 300 dwelling units. Now, obviously, they could not fit them on as homes, single-family homes or townhomes. The only way they could get that density, because of all that conservation, is to go up. So the only way they would get that density would be if someone decided to put apartments on there. But that land use is there. That land use has been on there since before I came in 2012. So that's what is the allowable density for that property. I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. And the full traffic impact analysis was required to be submitted for the project, which was reviewed by Kimley Horn. The projected build-out for the project is through 2025. The submitted study included an analysis of 2 transportation corridors and 7 intersections, in addition to the 2 driveway connections on East 26th Street. The 7 intersections which were reviewed were East 26 at Minnesota, East 26 at State Road 389, Minnesota Avenue at 24th Street, Minnesota Avenue at Mosley Drive, Mosley Drive at State Road 77, and 26th Street at State Road 77, and finally Mosley Drive at State Road 389. The 2 corridors were East 26th Street from Minnesota to State Road 389, or East Avenue, and Minnesota Avenue from Mosley Drive to 24th Street. So they are all the segments, the intersections that were actually reviewed, had data submitted for, and our reviewing engineers looked at. And the only intersection or corridor that they found that there would be a problem with at build out was the one at East 26th Street and County Road 389. Now, let me move on to here. So this is the aerial map. The circle here in red is where they say that we need to require a right turn lane, which the developer would put in. So it would be coming down here, and then the right turn would be, so coming south and then turning west like this. It would go in there. They did study the intersection here, as I just mentioned, the one in Minnesota. This shows the 3 land uses on there. So you've got the mixed use at the top there. The green is the conservation. They cannot touch that conservation, and they have to have a 30-foot buffer to protect it. So we don't need to worry about the conservation. This is the site plan that was submitted, the landscape plan. There was a question about the tree survey. We did have a tree survey submitted, and I believe there are some dead trees on the property, but there were about, I think it was 114 inches of live trees. Some were bougainvilleas, some were oaks. There was one magnolia. What they are doing is they're required to put a buffer along the top, between the development and the road there. When it comes to the trees that they're taking out, they are required to either pay a monetary amount, $100 per inch, for those trees, that we can use that money in the pot to plant trees in the city elsewhere, or they can mitigate by planting that same number of inches within their development, which is what they've selected to do. The only other thing I think that I can say is that at the meeting, there was some discussion there was some concerns about the traffic, even though we had the traffic impact analysis. There were some concerns because it was the PM peak hour that was looked at and not the AM. The PM peak hour is like the industry standard when it comes to looking at traffic, because it's usually the worst. It's usually when you've got the most traffic on the roads. We do have a particular situation in Lynn Haven, though, where we do have a number of schools, and so it is possible that our AM peak hour is worse than our PM peak hour. But the only way we're going to know that is if counts are done. The data that was submitted with the study was data from 2023, which is usual, like FDOT. If you try to get any numbers of the volume on the roads, the latest figures are always going to be from the prior year. So the latest figures were 2023. And our transportation engineer pointed out to me that although they did submit AM, they do have AM hours in what they submitted, but the PM were higher than the AM, but it was June. It was June. So I think, you know, I've discussed it with other staff and with the transportation engineer. They did use the latest figures that they could use, but they were June, but we didn't, in what we require when people want to submit development order, you know, this is new to us, the requirements. We haven't asked people to submit an in-depth analysis like this. We've just started it. And so we went with the industry standard, but I think that what we're going to have to do, and I didn't want to do it in the middle of this, is change that so that we require AM and PM because of the schools. But then we're also not going to be able to accept any development orders where any counts have been done when school's out. So it's a bit of a tricky situation for us because it means that we're putting restrictions on when developers can submit development orders. So I don't know legally, Kevin will have to advise, but the only way we're going to get real-time, realistic numbers is if either the developer or the city puts out traffic count strips when school goes back on the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of a regular work school week. Does that make sense? That's the only way that we're going to get a true picture, because right now the studies, the numbers that we have show that PM peak hour is higher than AM peak hour. So they did everything that they were asked. They did everything they could do. So that's where we're at.
All right, thank you. We are going to come back to Miss Amanda and get some questions from her, but we do want to give the developer and their engineers and team a chance to speak at this time, and then we'll come back and have our discussion. And then we'll have a chance for the public to make their comments as well.
Scott Rutherford, I am the engineer of record. Our traffic engineer, Mr. Loggeman, is here. Some of these traffic concerns. So yes, one of our biggest concerns brought up about the trees, and yes, I agree. That area is was the alley that Michael came through. That's why we chose to replant trees to try to revitalize that area. Again, we could have done more density. We didn't want to do that. We wanted to leave it, you know, something that would be fitting to the community, fitting to the people around this area. So that's why we chose to go that route. There were a couple of concerns that was brought up that I'll address. One of the residents brought up the concern about the post-development discharge. There's some areas there that flood. And yes, there's, this property sits is actually at kind of the top of the hill. So half of our site goes one direction, half of our site goes the other. Half of it goes to the direction that he was referring to. And so in our analysis and what Dewberry's job for review was to make sure that our development and post-development doesn't discharge any more than it does right now. So post-development discharge has to meet pre-development, including and up to the worst storms that are available, which by DOT standards, which is the 100-year events. So at the 100-year events, we have shown that that area won't be affected any more than what it already is. In fact, it'll probably be less because we're taking some, we're dispersing the water and we're containing a lot of it on site. Digging the ponds helps with the area being drier and more capable of holding the excess water. So I just wanted to address that. And yes, Mr. Logman is here to address the AM and PM peak, and if y'all have any questions for me, I'll be glad to answer them. And if you have any traffic questions, we'll be glad to bring up Mr. Logman.
Question, at the last meeting, there was a question about stormwater retention and whether it was feasible or possible to use the stormwater retention as reclaimed water as well, to pump back into your irrigation and so forth.
That is not, at this point.
Not a requirement, but.
Well, and it's not part of the design. To answer that question, we were to achieve that would be pretty substantial, but I mean, right now, because reuse isn't available, and it's our understanding that there was a time when the city felt like they could get the reuse through there, but at this point, it doesn't appear that way. So what we've done is we've provided 2 meters per unit, one for the irrigation, one for the potable.
Good evening. I'm John Olagerman with DRMP. We're at 2111 Panama City Beach, Florida. As Amanda mentioned, we were responsible to do the traffic impact analysis. I guess the concern about the intersection of 26th and Minnesota was brought up to my attention after the last commission meeting, and I went ahead and analyzed the intersection using the AM peak hour. As a matter of fact, that direction happened to have more AM turning left, going, I guess, you consider south on Minnesota, rather than right. The majority of the traffic, both AM and PM, which are pretty much the same, AM is 150 and PM is 158, they all turn right to go towards 24th Street and 77. And based on our analysis, even though we applied the seasonal factor and growth factor, and the total build out, it doesn't warrant any left or right turn. Basically function as a level of service B and A. We even look at the volume to capacity ratio, kind of similar, I guess, justification that the consultant used to justify a right turn lane on East Avenue. We use that analogy. That even doesn't come close. The volume to capacity is 0.3. You normally go above 1 in order to justify any turn lane improvement. So I understand the traffic was collected during the June timeframe, which school was closed. But considering the seasonal factor, which we normally don't have tourist influx on Minnesota, I realize we have it on 77, 390, all the major corridor, but 26 and Minnesota really is not a tourist destination, but even with that, it doesn't meet the warrant. You know, I heard Amanda mentioning maybe waiting until the school is open and then do another counts and do another analysis. That could be done. Just to let you know, I've been dealing with Mosley High School traffic since 1990. I used to be public works director of Bay County for 16 years. I remember even when the Mosley wasn't extended all the way to East Avenue. So all that traffic really ended up to be half an hour in the morning, half an hour in the afternoon. And that could be done with different fashion by enforcement and maybe other traffic control devices versus adding a turn lane, which is very expensive. Be happy to answer any question.
All right, do we have any questions for traffic study engineer?
So you all you haven't taken into consideration the seasonal traffic on Minnesota 26 intersection during Mosley school hours?
I have considered seasonal factor, but obviously the traffic was counted after the school was closed. And, you know, I see, of course, the peak hours that we looked was from 6 a.m. until 10. We picked the worst case scenario, the traffic from that time frame. And the same thing in the afternoon, we went from 3 all the way to 7. I understand, you know, definitely during the half an hour school opening and closing, the traffic would increase. There are a way of doing it. You know, obviously we know how many student goes, and we can develop that if the board wants us to do so, to kind of see what that traffic, but it won't be accurate, you know. And most of the analysis that we do, they're very conservative as well.
The four-way stop at Minnesota and 24th it's backed up almost all day, regular time. I don't know about the impact of 154 townhomes heading that way, especially during school traffic. Also, the townhome layout itself, the entrance and exits are on 26th Street, right?
Correct. Yeah, two full entrances.
There's two, but they're kind of together. So everybody's in and out on the same road there.
Yeah, there's some distance. Obviously, they're separated.
Yeah.
And then we project more traffic would use the entrance towards west on 26th, the western connection, the one that is closer to Minnesota.
Did you say the PM peak hours was 3 to 7?
The time frame that we look, yeah.
Okay.
And pick the worst case, the one that provides us the maximum reps.
Commissioner Ward, do you have any questions?
No, sir. My questions were pretty much answered before. Thanks.
And Commissioner Vandegrift?
You stated that for a turn lane to be provided, the algorithm that you used said that it was only a 0.3. Is that for a specific area or in general of all the points you were discussing?
The overall intersection is level of service, I would say B, but just looking at the direction, for instance, if you look at the right turn or left turn, those are the ones that we look at the volume versus the capacity, so-called, and then that's where the ratio comes. If it is more than 1, that means it's failing. Obviously, the volume is more than allowable capacity. But if it is less, we're good. In this particular case, we came at, I believe, 0.13. .32, sorry. Which is, we have another 70% to fail.
Are there any additional questions at this time for the traffic study? All right, if we would, we'll hear from our traffic engineer review.
Hi there, Vincent Spar from Kimley Horn, reviewing the studies on behalf of the city. So if you had any questions from the review side, from how we interpreted the results of their analysis, happy to answer those. We talked a little bit a couple weeks ago about what the findings were, and they went back, and what he was referring to was the intersection to the west during the AM peak. And like has been discussed, the counts weren't necessarily during school while it was in session, and that traffic was therefore not accounted for. But I will say, from just a cursory look, and I just got this 15 minutes ago, but it does appear that the analysis is all good on that side. I would say the major concern still needs to be at the other intersection with 26th and 389.
Are there any questions for him? Do you have any questions, Commissioner Ward?
No, sir, I'm good. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any other presenters from the city or the development side? All right. Thank you for your presentation. I guess now is time for open dialogue. I know we asked for the workshop so we could have a chance to discuss the different variables, especially the one dealing with the traffic, also following upon the trees as well. So what are your thoughts from what we're hearing tonight in regards to the traffic studies?
So first, let me say thanks for looking into the trees. That was great to hear. Happy to hear it. My concern is I get what they're saying with, by our predictions with the school traffic, but people keep talking about Mosley traffic, but there's also Bay Haven over there too. And even before I was a commissioner, before I even considered running for office, even years ago, I've had multiple people tell me that live in that area that traffic comes to a standstill around pickup time for Bay Haven. And I just don't know how we can make an accurate decision based on a projection without actually doing the traffic study during school hours. To me, it's not enough data to make an educated decision.
When you do mention Bay Haven, and I'm one of the parents that gets in the line to go to Bay Haven, it's like two waves of traffic. And I guess if I'm hearing the traffic study correct, that the real question would be turning off on a 389, which at times Bay Haven traffic does back up to 26th Street when you're trying to actually go into Bay Haven in the morning. So there's like two waves. There's that early morning wave for the elementary kids, then there's that second wave for the middle school kids. So if you don't time it just right, and then comes the Mosley wave, which is still coming down 77 as well. It's not just going down. Certainly, it's a problem going down Minnesota, as Commissioner Perno is alluding to, but it's also coming down 77 because we still have students coming, from the north that are coming to Mosley also. Well, not 77, 389. So Mosley traffic is also coming that way, which then sort of bottlenecks right there in that area. And I guess one of my concerns would be, I don't know if we really keep account of it because it's more county. I do know in the past few years there have been several accidents at that intersection. I don't know the cause of those accidents. I don't know what the count is on that, but I do know there are accidents at that intersection. So I don't know is it because of school traffic? Is it because of, I know it's a difficult turn there. So I would say myself personally, because I live in Morewood Highlands, 26th Street is how I get to Walmart, right? Because I'm still waiting on Mr. Baker to find me a way out of Morewood Highlands. So 26th Street is how I get to Walmart. That's how the majority of Morewood Highlands, which is 500 plus homes, gets to Walmart, is down 26th Street. But now, because of how that traffic backs up at different times of the day, I choose to turn on Canal and then go up to 40th Place to go back to Morewood Highlands instead of going all the way to the intersection of 26 and 389, because you can sit there sometimes for 5-10 minutes, especially if you're taking a left turn, trying to get back down 389 to get back to Morewood Highlands. So I can attest that, yes, there is some traffic issues on 389, especially during the Bay Haven traffic time on both sides, drop off and pick up. And then in the afternoons, it can be that way as well. It can back up, especially in that middle lane, which I think also creates a problem for the people that are on the 39th Place, on the north side of 389 also. So that is something to consider. So what are you suggesting? What are your suggestions, I guess, in regards to the traffic studies?
I think we need to do a study or require a study. For me, I can't, in good conscience, make a decision without seeing those numbers.
Okay.
I don't know if we're allowed to do that. I don't know if that's something we need to ask the attorney, if we can make that a stipulation, but I really think we need those numbers.
All right. Commissioner Perno, what are your thoughts?
I would agree with Commissioner Peebles, and those are my thoughts, is that there needs to be a detailed seasonal traffic study for the school hours, in that area, with Mosley and Bay Haven being so close together. And honestly, Minnesota is just a little two-lane road with ditches on both sides, and to take on the impact of, well, the study said 95 cars out, 54 in, or whatever, but it's going to be more than that. And I don't know about people migrating more to 389 than 77. I think my deepest concerns are how bad it's going to fail in that Minnesota area. It already fails at those two four-way stops at Mosley Drive and 24th. So, I'm reviewing the emails that I received, and I mean, stormwater traffic, the impact on the environment, it's all the people's concerns. And we hear you. I really think my biggest hangup is the traffic, though. I mean, it's going to bite us on the butt if we don't really take a hard look at this. So, and I'm waiting to hear from everybody out there too.
Commissioner Ward, do you have any input on any of your concerns that we need to take a further look into?
Not really. All the points that were brought up before is pretty much what I was thinking. I don't know if something, I know they're talking about a phased approach, and I don't know if we could do a stipulation where they could start with phase 1 and look at a traffic study before they go to the next phase. Just trying to think, brainstorming different ideas, but that's one of the things that I'm kind of thinking about right now.
Okay, thank you. Question for Miss Amanda, just for point of clarity. You made mention earlier, and I know we talked about it in the previous meeting, but we've talked about a lot regarding this development. Earlier today, you mentioned about the stipulation that the Planning Commission suggested regarding the right turn lane or the turn lane. Is that from the beginning of the development, or is that once they reach the threshold for the development?
That threshold information wasn't taken to the Planning Commission. That was something that has been thought about since to try and find a remedy, really.
Got it. So the Planning Commission is suggesting that
The approval conditional upon them installing that turn lane, but they didn't say whether it should be at the beginning or the end.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarity. Are there any other questions for Miss Amanda while she's here?
I guess on that turn lane, someone brought up that where that turn lane would be at. Someone that lives there emailed me about how that's a really, like the mayor was saying, how that's an area where there's been a lot of accidents. So just wanted, is that turn lane going to be an issue when, for the vision of other cars coming towards it? You know, sometimes if you pull up in the turn lane and the other car's coming up, it's hard to see the cars coming this way.
And I
No.
have Bobby answer that
Sure.
because I'm not an infrastructure person.
Sure.
Mr. Baker, come on down. The price is right.
So you're asking about the view of when they actually stop?
Right, the view of where the turn lane is going to be, there are some questions about the visibility for oncoming traffic.
Typically at an intersection like that, if you notice, if there's two lanes beside each other and there's turn lane, one is set back further than the other one. And that's for line of sight. So they would need to be, they wouldn't be even stops, they would be offset a little bit.
So you're merging onto the road, basically.
Right, so the one that's going straight or turning left, it's typically set back a little bit. And it's mainly for cars turning in.
where State Road comes out at 390, where those apartments are, that arbitrace right there.
Right, it's, that one's
They have a
set
little
back
turn lane
bit.
right there, set back.
Yes. Mhm.
You know where I'm
And
talking
it's,
about?
yeah, and it's.
Would it be
typically
similar to
at
that?
Any big intersection.
So it would be a turn lane as you come off the road to go right, to go.
Yeah,
Toward
the turn
Bay
lane
Haven.
going right would stop further out for the line of sight. Then the other lane would be set back in for the turn radius of vehicles coming in.
Thank you.
And there'd be a second lane for people to turn left too, right?
Well, they'll turn left or go straight on that one.
Right.
The one we're talking about adding is a right turn only.
Right now, they just back up.
Yes, it is back up.
All right. Any other questions for Mr. Baker?
Yeah, how do you feel about the Minnesota Avenue intersections?
It definitely needs something. I don't believe it warrants a light yet, but it does warrant the turn lane.
Oh, you're talking about the 389. I'm talking about the other direction.
Yeah, it's real
Minnesota.
bad when school lets out,
Yeah.
but you know, is the developer responsible for the schools? You know, the developer should be responsible for his development, what he's impacting. Schools, you know, there always been a problem with traffic with any school.
Right, you're gonna have your peak times.
Right. Mhm. Which is why
You're gonna have
we
additional
require,
impact though with,
which is why we typically require the PM peak hours. That's normal, standard, you know, conditions, but schools are an exception.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Vandergrift?
Has anyone thought about possibly discussing with the school system a different exit strategy for the students at Mosley?
Yes.
Okay. Way to go. But I want to also discuss not only the traffic, but I've had citizens contact me about their concerns about the stormwater, about the ditches, about the runoff from both hammocks and from the other side of the road, on the other side of 26th Street. So we need to address that too for our citizens.
I do know, I believe, Scott, you made reference to that a little bit earlier. Could you provide a little more clarity for that or answer additional questions that Commissioner Vandergrift may have, please?
Yes, so in our analysis of stormwater, we're required to study the entire basin that the development is going to be in. So we look not only at just our site, but we follow wherever the water is coming from and where it's going to. In fact, in our stormwater study, we're doing also performing a LOMAR. So we had to look well past 231 to see what all water was coming to us and how far of the water that leaves our site, where it goes. So in that process, we look at and we map out what the pre-development rate of runoff is during multiple storm events, anywhere from a 3-year, 2-hour event to a 100-year, 24-hour event. So meaning the worst rain event that could happen that lasted a 24-hour period within a 100-year period of time. Those numbers have been developed by the FDOT, and we follow those guidelines for DEP purposes, for development order purposes. We follow those guidelines, and our job is to make sure that the amount of, not just the amount, but the rate that it runs off, meaning how quickly it's going to go off, which, as we all know, in a bad rain event, it's water that when it comes all at one time, it channelizes. So then that's when you get the most damage. So our job is to make sure that when it leaves our site, that it's not running off at any higher rate than it would have if there was nothing developed there, as it is right now, and compare what we do to that, and we have to meet that or do better. And so that's what we do. That's what Dewberry has reviewed and approved with our types of discharge structures.
So the people that live in the hammocks, the townhouse section, have nothing to worry about?
No, ma'am.
And the people across the street, 26th Street, for example, I believe one of the streets is Carey Lane, they have nothing to worry about?
I've done my job right, then no.
Thank you.
So one of my questions would be if, and hopefully not, if there is some stormwater that's impeding, as the development is going on, would we be able to come back, and usually that's what we do with other developments, go back to the developer or go back to the engineer and say, hey, these are some of the concerns that we're having, or citizens are bringing them to us. So we're not necessarily going out proactively looking for concerns like, hey, I know over in Mort Highlands, developments have come about. And so there's been some things there. Over in Cameron's Crossing, developments happen. There's been some, impeding on the stormwater there. So phone calls came in, city went out, and then we were able to discuss with the engineers, hey, these are some of the these are some of the failures that we do see happening. Although we know that at that time the development is not complete, so all the stormwater infrastructure is probably not in place to be able to do what it is designed to do initially. Just wanting to have that communication that if there is a concern during the development process, that the city would be able to come back and speak with you or whomever we need to discuss with to say, hey, can you come out and show us? You might be able to say, well, hey, this is happening because we got this pile of dirt over here, or so.
We'll be glad to anytime, of course. Again, I also live in the area, so I travel that road myself. I don't want to see anything damaged during the process. So you alluded to it, or you mentioned it, that sometimes during the process, runoff happens because the infrastructure is not in place yet to control it like it would once the design is finished. So there might have to be measures that we haven't foreseen that need to be taken once we get full under construction and see that we need to address something by digging temporary trenches or something that affect to contain more water on site and not allow it. That's for sure. We'll definitely do that.
All right, thank you. Like I said, it's not something that we try to do proactively, but being accountable to the citizens as they do call, to be able to say, hey, we are meeting with, the engineers and working to try to resolve that issue.
Anytime.
Are there any additional questions for the engineer or anyone else from the development team? All right. Thank you.
Could I ask one question? Mm-hmm. So going back to the traffic study, my question would be, so if we do that development, and I know y'all were discussing this a little bit and I didn't catch all of it, but So we do a traffic study during the school time. And one of the commissioners mentioned that possibly we're doing the phasing, so we get into a certain point, maybe at the beginning of phase 2, before that gets kicked off, we have that traffic study intact. Would we be allowed to go up to the number of units that triggers that one intersection improvement? Could we go up to that with the phasing in order to get those units in? And at that point, we'll have the traffic study completed, because by that time, we'll have gone through probably a couple of school seasons. So is that a possibility to phase it like that?
That's typically how it would work. So like right now, you've got, planned for one plat for 154, right? You got your beginning sections, like 62 units, then you've got 80 and then 12 off to the side. So yeah, if you started with just like a phase 1 of 62 units, I'm sure both traffic engineers would probably say you're not going to trigger anything with 62. But while you're developing that 62, get that traffic study in, and that study, those engineers will tell us, okay, well, at unit number 97, you need this turn lane. So typically how it would work is that, yeah, you're good for your 62, and then you might even get phase 2 platted, and then you can only pull building permits on the next 31 lots or something, and then you're just kind of cut off until that is complete.
Until we reach that threshold.
That's how it's typically would be done if you phase it like that.
Any response from the commission?
So basically, we could approve it, let's say hypothetically, we approved it contingent upon that a traffic study is done during phase 1, and we'll reevaluate before phase 2 hits? Is that how?
That's one way. I mean, I've seen it where, the entire plat is done, and then they just kind of wait for the number, because you have the ultimate say-so as far as you can't get a building permit, right? So it might be platted, but you can't do anything with it. I think ideally, from a developer standpoint, they would probably rather see, probably break up that plat. That's, I think, the second agenda item tomorrow. Break that up as opposed to one plat for 154 and break it up into, okay, we're going to do phase, 1, 2, and 3, or 1 and 1A, however they want to do it. And that way you can probably get comfortable with the traffic engineers that, it looks like phase 1 would be 62 lots. I mean, from what I'm hearing, that's probably, at least from John, I mean, he doesn't even think it triggers it now. So, I mean, I think that would be probably fine. And then they would come back and get phase 2 approved and have time to do that school time traffic study. And then you would get a number from that engineer saying, okay, that turn lane needs to be in by the time lot 96 gets, or whatever the traffic engineer says. And then come back and do phase 2 or phase 2A, however they want to do it.
I definitely think, I think that's something we should consider. Sounds like it would be a win-win for the developer and for the city in regards to the study. From what I recall, our last time meeting, I think what sort of triggered the red flag for the commission, and they can chime in on this, is that it was stated that, or it was suggested that the turn lane should not be added until you reached 136 threshold, which would, I think initially was just like phase 1, and then phase 2 would be adding your additional 18 units for the 154. So if I recall, I think some of our concern, or what I inferred, was that you might just stop at the 136 and not do the 154. And then therefore, and not that it would be purposely done not to put in the turning lane to stop at 136, but I think if I'm gathering that's what I think sort of triggered us a little bit in wanting to look more into the traffic as well, was that, okay, the turn lane isn't being put in until the second phase, but what if something happens and they decide not to do the second phase, then now we're going to be stuck probably with this traffic issue. And so I think that's what really caused us to want to dig in a little more, was because of when that turn lane was going to actually, when it was suggested that it would be put in for the traffic. So.
Yes, sir. So a couple of things. I would ask if there's a condition that could be included in the development order that would ensure that that didn't happen. So, you know, there's bonding or whatever might necessarily have to happen down the road. Yeah, thank you. And then my other question would be, if we were to agree to, 136 is the number that Vincent has come up with for tripping it, but we would be willing to, you know, if we were to say 120 units, rather than going all the way up to the threshold, if we were to agree to come down to a lesser number, that would help. And, you know, because I do understand the concern for sure. We've got a phasing plan here that we've come up with, and in this phasing plan, phases 1 and 2 are total up to actually just 1 and 2 ends up being 116 units. So at that point, that's even less than the 120 that I just mentioned. So I think we'd be willing to definitely help in any way we can.
Okay. So yeah, I think that was in addition to, you know, the traffic concerns, I think that was one of the concerns, was because that would be something that will help, you know, mitigate traffic issues, you know, by doing that. So, but certainly we'll be able to have more definite answers tomorrow. But I do think it's something that we'll be considering and discussing more now that we have more options. I think before we just sort of an either or, and that's why we're having the workshop, because we didn't want it to just be a either or. Let's come together and see how can we move forward in helping you, but also at the same time ensuring that we're hearing from our citizens, you know, in trying to respond to their concerns as well. So, all right.
Y'all want a copy of this phasing plan? Got a copy here, but we can bring it to the regular meeting as well. But that's
if you could just bring that tomorrow, and then we'll take a look at it then. Thank you. All right. So at this time, we're going to hear from the audience. We don't have a sign-in sheet for today, right? All right. So to try to make this a little more organized, thank you all for coming out for the workshop. We always want to hear from you all. So if we do this a little more organized, let's try to go row by row. Okay. So we'll start with Mr. Walker's row. So, you know, we'll start with the first row, and then we'll just go successively to each row. And then once we get to the back row, then we'll come to this side over here to see if there are any concerns from this row. Okay. All right. So let's start here. Well, I was going to call you up first anyway. I know you had something.
But do me a favor, thank you for at least setting some rules down on what you want for workshops. It's very confusing as we go from meeting to meeting when the rules are changed and we're not told about it. Good evening. I was at a meeting this morning, and I couldn't get to speak because I had a doctor's appointment dealing with part of the subject matter. What you have in front of you here has been done before. We are working under the impression for the last 20 years with 3 projects that are on hold because of traffic, stormwater, and infrastructure. Got 3 of them still pending. They're from 20 years ago. You're fighting with ignorance, invisible ignorance here. You don't realize that TPO, and you have 2 representatives to that, know more about this and least about this. For example, City Street, 26th Street, is on the schedule with the TPO for connection across 77 to 26th Street through private property. It's in there. That's going to increase your traffic volume because that's the people that are going to come from Panama City, the beach, and live over here, back and forth. You're not thinking of the total picture here. Total picture here is infrastructure, traffic study, and the developments that you have now and are still pending. Development you have pending now is 950 acres. It was designed almost 20 years ago, is still pending, and is still hinged upon being not even out of phase one. They haven't finished phase one. Why? Because 390 and the TPO are holding you up. TPO, 390 have you prisoners. We had a meeting with the TPO and we discussed it with them. They still don't know when they're going to be finished with 390. 390 implicates this too. Okay? 389 was done. 12th Street is scheduled for renovation and upgrade. And that's going to split the city in half again and create traffic problems. And now on the schedule, 26th Street is going to be connected from on the other side of 77 through private property across to 26th Street on the other side, which is going to impact on this, what you have here. Second, your infrastructure cannot support this development. Your outreach is total over 400 units. That's what you've got to look forward to. You've got to deal with that, the eventuality of where you're going to be. Are you going to, after the first section, they don't use zoning or anything like that. They're using sections. So if the first section is not finished, for example, in the 950 acres, phase one is not finished yet, 20 years later. If that's not finished, you're not going to get to the second section. Your total will be over 400 units. Your traffic study is not going to be good, what you're doing now for that. I know you were talking about it, you were discussing it. That's number two. Your sewer and water. We had a meeting this morning about the sewer and water program. You're on a 5-year program with that. If nothing happens with growth, catastrophe, you're possibly going to be able to enlarge the sewer plant in 5 years and go further in debt with 50 million plus. That doesn't count this development. Our sewer plant has not been and has been over capacity for the last 15 years. We've been told it's 110%, 100 this. How can you get any further than 110% right now when you're going to get a development that's going to have 150 units in it right away? In the perspective, they said they were in a rush to get this done. That's why we had one meeting on it, and luckily you caught it and tabled it. What you have here is all these things adding up. You've got to look forward to the overall dramatic portion of what's going to affect this city now. And 5 years from now, and 5 years from then. I won't be here. None of you were here and sat in the meetings that we sat on for the 950 acres or the fuel depot. None of you. We were here. We had the same discussion that they had there, having now. You've got to look forward to the future and take in the whole dynamics of this picture. Now, you've just learned that TPO is scheduling 26th Street. You haven't even discussed it. Haven't even thought about it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Is there someone else from that row that would like to speak? Okay. The next row, would you like to say something, madam?
Laura Mitchell, I live at the Hammocks. Y'all just keep talking about Mosley and Bay Haven. There are actually 4 schools, Highland Park, Alternative School, New Horizon, and also Haney over there. So it's just not Mosley and Bay Haven. Also, you have a fire department down there. So if you've got all this traffic backed up and everything on 389 plus Mosley, and you have an emergency, I mean, I'm from Missouri, and I am astounded at people that do not pull over for the emergency vehicles. or even know how to do a four-way. I mean, come on. We all learned that when we all learned to drive. But you have all that. And I can't believe that there is not enough evidence for a stoplight. As Mr. Baker said, it doesn't warrant a stoplight. There is so much traffic in that area. And also, the hammocks, as you're coming toward 389, there is a bus stop, which is already a safety hazard. Because you have people pulling over on the sides, and you have all kinds of people just stopping. So we already have a bus stop there that's a safety hazard. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next row, anyone from that row like to say anything?
Good evening. First off, you've touched on a lot of the things, and again, the traffic study for the school during the school period. I live in the townhouse side of the hammocks. There are times, without exaggeration, it takes 22 minutes to come from the hammocks through the school intersection going to 77. And it's gotten to a point that 90% of the people that drive up that area turn and go down Minnesota to avoid going to the 77 light, because that's a 7-minute light, or it seems like it at least. So the traffic is a big thing. The other concerns have been addressed, definitely the water. One of the areas that I don't know that have been addressed, but the runoff water, or the water that we use for watering the lawns, are there any considerations given to what that side water can be? Can that be used to water the lawns? You're already having troubles with that situation over in the hammocks area with many times. But a lot of the other things have been addressed. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I do know earlier we did briefly talk about reuse, water reuse, but we didn't go into great detail on that. But thank you for bringing that matter back to our attention.
I'm Nick Nichols. I live on the townhouse side of the hammocks. And I know that Magnolia between 389 and 77 is just broken. You cannot get in or out at the time the school is dismissing or picking up. Until we figure out how to make that usable and workable, I just don't see any other option to try to add more traffic that's going to make it worse. I foot stomp the other comments as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Pretty good, a little hungry.
Every day, from, where problem, place Cameron's Crossing where the water problem is already, and the reason for that is because of building. We had some issues with that beforehand, and I think this is only going to increase that problem. Because I don't know that much as, if anything, has been done to correct that problem at this point. I can tell you I walk that neighborhood every day, and I know where the water problems are. I've seen them and walked through them. The other concern that I have is if you're going to turn, say, 150 cars out onto Minnesota or onto 26th Street, good luck. Not safe to begin with. Those streets are, I mean, if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, it's easy for there to be an accident there. I know there have been accidents up by the schools, and sometimes it takes us 10, 15 minutes to get out of 26th Street to get out on 389. Especially when the schools are backed up, because when they back up in all directions. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from that row? Okay, the next row, are there any comments from the next row? Okay. If not, then the next row, I think that's my gentleman here. Do you have any comments, sir? All right. And then the next row, I believe that's my lady in the pink. Any comments from that row? All right, we'll go to the next row. Any comments from that row? All right, we'll go to the next row. All right, we got comments coming from this row.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mayor, City Manager. It's good to see y'all. I have some concerns with the traffic as well. School traffic, if you go out there, as it's already been spoken to tonight, 10 and 15 cars piled up at a stop sign. It's ridiculous. I live in the neighborhood, 26th Street, Kimberly Drive, 24th Street. It's all a cut through. All your FedEx, your UPS trucks, school buses, everything. They funnel in there. There is so much traffic there now, and you're going to dump 150 more units in there. Not saying we don't want development. I'm all for it. The plan, the phase, that's bit us in the butt before. We don't need to do that. If we want to do phased, I think we need to do a bond. Have the developer pull a bond so the tax dollars are not coming from us to pay for their mistake or if they leave. Not saying Skip and Scott, they're good people, but business is business. And I think it shouldn't be a burden on the citizens to have to pay for a mistake if something fails. Stormwater is already an issue there. Yes, by law, they have to collect their stormwater on their property. But we already know that 26 in Minnesota, it floods over it. The culvert's not big enough, everything else. There's gonna be some overflow. Engineers, you can pull the numbers, do everything you want with it. But in reality, we all know what happens. We've seen many projects where we had to go back and try to re-engineer. It don't need to be on my dollar or anybody else's. It needs to be on the developer. So just keep that in mind.
All right, thank you. All right, anyone else from the row, the next row behind Chief Delonge, Mr. Brown, Mr. Mike, anybody back there? All right, coming to this side over here, first row.
I'm gonna try to make it quick because I gotta go to the bathroom. I was hoping I would have got to go first, but so basically, everybody's saying all the great things, and you guys are almost to the solution. I feel like, phasing it, bond, good idea. If you're not going to do the bond, I feel like business is business. They showed their hand, 120. Let's bring it down. I think the first section you said was like 62. That sounds like a good number. 62, build 62 with the bond or whatever, or build the turn first. But here's the big thing is that intersection of 26 and 389, that's our problem. That's not their problem. Their problem is if they go over a certain amount, you got to have a turn lane. But our problem is that intersection. So take all this and figure out what it's going to take for us to get a light down there, because that's the real solution. Is a light is safe. Nobody die, or okay, less people will die if there's a light. More people will die in accidents if there's not a light. I've driven down there a few times, and when you're turning left, it's dangerous. It's hard to see. The setback thing, it's still hard to see, and I got a big, tall truck. It's still hard to see. So think about safety, but if you're going to phase it and you're going to let them build the road later or the turn lane later, bring that number down, please, because 120 is basically 136. Bring it down, cut it in half. Maybe it's the 62. That seems more reasonable. So thank you. I'll be back.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
In 2008, the economy collapsed, and I saw lots of developments here in Lynn Haven and all over the county just stop. So I think it's kind of a little bit naive to say that, the development will be completed and then they do this. That is concerning to me because lots of developers go out of business, the economy collapses, they quit selling stuff, and projects don't get finished. And when projects don't get finished, then the infrastructure that you're waiting for to be done doesn't get done either. Thank you.
Thank you. The next row, and I think we've heard from everyone except for a couple of people on that row. Any other comments from that row? All right, then we'll move on to our next row. And yes, ma'am. She has a notepad, so.
Doing my homework and looking at my notes. So I live in the hammocks. And then prior to living in the hammocks, I lived at Jake's Landing, and which is a development. And when Jake's Landing opened up, there's 75 units over there, and they have not got them all rented out. And then in April, they decided to sell the townhomes and not rent them out. When you look at, people are double income earners, so it's just not 154 cars. We're talking double. And then if they have children driving because of their driving age, you've got that volume as well. So number of cars for a 200-foot turning lane, if the car is an average length of 15 feet, what's your number there? And that's just right in the queue, right, to go. Trees. So if trees are planted to replace the 114 inches, what is the warranty for those trees? Everybody can plant a tree, but what if the tree doesn't survive? What are the plans to mitigate that? What's the warranty? What's the follow-up to those trees being planted? In the traffic study, one of you had mentioned the number of accidents that have occurred there. That should probably be a fundamental part of the traffic study when it's discussed, basics, and then how many speeding tickets have been issued along there. And we're already talking about conditions that are such, that are being challenged right now. This is only going to exacerbate that. And so because this is now bringing it to the forefront, this is the time to think about it. Let me see. That would be it. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing those matters to our attention. Do you have anything, sir? Nothing from him, and I don't think there is anyone sitting behind those other rows there. All right, well, thank you all for coming out this evening. Certainly, engineers, you've heard the concerns, so when we come back tomorrow, give you a chance to mull over some of those things to, as needed to have a response if, the commission follows up with some of those concerns as well. Again, thank you all for coming out. Thank you for the studies that's been done to make this workshop worthwhile so we can have a great discussion. And thank you all for your input, letting us know, your concerns and how you feel. And hopefully we can, come together for a solution that will be something of benefit for the developer as well as something of benefit for our community as well. All right, everyone have a great evening. Workshop adjourned.